The diplomatic chamber aboard the Nexus station stretched wider than most human cities, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 1,000 different suns. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the human delegation's podium, her hands steady despite the weight of what she was about to reveal. Around her, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated atmospheric bubbles, their alien forms creating a rainbow of biology that never failed to amaze her. The HFY delegation occupied the prime position directly across from the humans. Their insectoid forms gleamed under the artificial lighting, mandibles clicking in what Elena had learned to recognize as barely contained irritation. High Counselor Zixandra, their leader, possessed compound eyes that seemed to dissect every human movement with calculated precision. Elena activated the holographic display with a thought transmitted through her neural interface. The three-dimensional star map materialized above the assembly, showing the outer rim territories where humanity had been systematically pushed back over the past 50 standard years. Red zones marked former human colonies, now empty or occupied by other species. "Honored delegates," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the universal translators. "We stand before you today not as conquerors or aggressors, but as a species fighting for survival. The data we're about to present will change everything you think you know about the threats facing our galaxy." The Veltaran representative, a graceful being that resembled living water in a roughly humanoid shape, rippled with what Elena interpreted as skepticism. "The humans speak of threats, while they themselves represent the greatest danger to galactic peace," the being's translated voice echoed through the chamber. "Your species' violent history speaks for itself." Elena had expected this response. Humanity's reputation preceded them wherever they went in the galaxy. Stories of their wars, their tendency toward aggression, their unpredictable nature had spread faster than their actual diplomatic missions. Most species viewed humans as barely controlled savages who had somehow stumbled into space travel. "That violent history you speak of," Elena replied calmly, "is precisely why we're qualified to recognize what's coming." She gestured to the star map, and it shifted to show the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something that should terrify every sentient being in this chamber." The hologram displayed sensor readings that painted a picture of impossible scale. Ships. Not just ships, but an armada that stretched across light years of space. The readings showed energy signatures unlike anything in the galactic database, propulsion systems that defied known physics, and most disturbing of all, a trajectory aimed directly at the heart of civilized space. "The Devourers," Elena said, using the human designation for the entities. "We've been tracking their approach for the past 5 years. Our xenobiologists and tactical analysts have reached the same conclusion. They're not coming to negotiate." High Counselor Zixandra's mandibles clacked rapidly, the Kethvar equivalent of derisive laughter. "More human paranoia and warmongering. You present fabricated data to justify your species' continued presence in regions where you're no longer welcome." The accusation stung because Elena knew how it appeared. Humanity had been systematically excluded from the major trade routes, denied access to the most habitable worlds, and relegated to the dangerous frontier regions. The Galactic Council's official position was that humans were too volatile, too aggressive, too unpredictable to be trusted with significant territory or resources. Dr. James Chen, the expedition's lead xenobiologist, stood from his position behind Elena. His weathered face bore the scars of decades spent studying hostile alien environments, and his cybernetic left eye gleamed as it interfaced with the holographic display. "The biological data alone should convince you," Chen said, highlighting sections of the alien ships. "We've managed to capture samples of their technology from scout vessels that probed our outer defenses. The material composition suggests a species that consumes not just organic matter, but the fundamental building blocks of matter itself. They don't just eat life, they eat reality. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated voices, each species expressing their disbelief in their own way. The crystalline Shardani chimed like broken glass, while the gaseous Nephrim created swirling vortexes of agitation within their containment fields. Elena raised her hand for silence, knowing she was losing them. I understand your skepticism. Our species hasn't exactly earned your trust, but consider this. Why would we fabricate a threat this massive? What could we possibly gain? Territory, High Counselor Zixandra replied without hesitation. Resources. A return to the privileged position your species believes it deserves. Humans have always used fear as a weapon. The words hit Elena like physical blows because they contained enough truth to be devastating. Humanity's expansion into space had been marked by conflict. They had fought the Kethvar over mineral rights in the Proxima system. They had displaced the gentle Othmiran from their traditional breeding grounds in the Veil Nebula. They had even gone to war with themselves, a concept so alien to most galactic species that it had sealed humanity's reputation as irredeemably violent. But Elena also knew something the other species didn't understand. That same violence, that same aggressive nature, had prepared humanity for threats that peaceful species couldn't even conceptualize. Show them the Kepler station recording, she said to Chen. The hologram shifted to display the final transmission from humanity's most remote outpost. Kepler station had been positioned 12 light-years beyond the galactic rim, an early warning system disguised as a research facility. The recording showed the station's crew of 37 humans in their final moments. The alien ship that had destroyed Kepler Station defied easy description. It seemed to exist partially outside normal space, its hull rippling like liquid while maintaining a solid structure. As they watched, the ship deployed what could only be described as feeding tendrils, massive appendages that began breaking down the station's matter at the molecular level. But what made Elena's stomach turn wasn't the destruction itself. It was the efficiency. The aliens didn't just destroy the station, they consumed it completely. Metal, atmosphere, even the quantum fluctuations of the station's power core were absorbed into the ship's hull, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The chamber fell silent as the recording ended. Elena could see the impact on the assembled delegates, the way their various forms of body language shifted from skepticism to concern. This is why we've been fortifying our frontier territories, Elena continued. This is why we've been militarizing our colonies, not to threaten you, but to prepare for what's coming. The Veltaran delegate's liquid form darkened. Even if this threat is real, what would you have us do? Our species are not warriors. That's exactly the problem, Elena replied. You've built a civilization based on cooperation and peace. It's beautiful, it's inspiring, and it's going to get you all killed. These devourers don't negotiate. They don't trade. They don't coexist. They consume. High Counselor Zixandra's compound eyes focused on Elena with newfound intensity. And you believe humanity can stop them? I believe humanity is the only species that can stop them, Elena said, knowing how arrogant it sounded. Not because we're superior, but because we're damaged. We understand violence in ways you can't. We've spent millennia learning how to kill efficiently, how to wage war on a scale that staggers civilized minds. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Elena could feel the discomfort radiating from the assembled delegates, their revulsion at humanity's naked acknowledgement of its own brutality. So you're saying, the Shardani representative chimed, that your species' greatest weakness is actually your greatest strength. I'm saying, Elena replied, that sometimes the only thing that can stop a monster is another monster, and like it or not, we're the monsters you need. Dr. Chen activated another display showing humanity's current military capabilities. The numbers were staggering, even by galactic standards. Humanity had more warships per capita than any other species. Their weapons technology focused not on precision or efficiency, but on raw, destructive power. Their soldiers trained not just for victory, but for survival in conditions that would break the minds of most civilized beings. The Devourers are approximately 18 months away from the outer colonies, Elena continued. Based on their current trajectory and consumption rate, they'll reach the galactic core within 5 years. We can slow them down, maybe even stop them, but only if we're allowed to position our forces in the buffer zones. The buffer zones. The very territories from which humanity had been systematically excluded over the past half-century. Elena could see the political calculation happening in real time across the chamber. To allow humanity back into those regions would be to admit that the galaxy's most despised species was also its most necessary. High Counselor Zix Andra spoke carefully. What assurances can you provide that humanity won't use this crisis to reclaim territories you've lost? None, Elena said bluntly. Because we will reclaim those territories, not through conquest but through necessity. Those regions are going to become war zones. Your peaceful species can't function in war zones. We can. The honesty was brutal and necessary. Elena could see some delegates recoiling, but others nodding with grudging understanding. The Kethvar, despite their antagonism toward humanity, were pragmatic above all else. There's something else, Dr. Chen said, highlighting a section of the alien ship data. The Devourers show clear signs of adaptation. Each ship we've encountered has been different from the last, as if they're evolving their technology in real time. They learn from every encounter. Elena felt a chill at Chen's words. This was the detail that kept her awake at night, the variable that made all their projections uncertain. Humanity's advantage lay in their experience with warfare. But what happened when they faced an enemy that could adapt to their tactics faster than they could develop new ones? Which brings us to our final point, Elena said, steeling herself for what came next. We're not just asking for permission to defend the galaxy. We're asking for resources to do it properly. The chamber erupted again. Elena had known this would be the breaking point, the moment where altruism collided with self-interest. Humanity needed not just access to the buffer zones, but the industrial capacity to build weapons on a scale never before seen in galactic history. You want us to fund a human military buildup, High Counselor Zixandra stated flatly. I want you to fund your own survival, Elena replied. Every ship we build, every weapon we forge, every soldier we train will be fighting for your continued existence. The question is whether you're willing to swallow your pride long enough to let us do it. The Veltaran delegate's form rippled with agitation. And what happens after this threat is eliminated? Do we simply trust that humanity will voluntarily disarm? Elena met the being's gaze directly. No. You don't trust us, and we don't trust you. But mutual distrust is better than mutual extinction. Build your own defenses if you want. Form alliances, create oversight committees, do whatever makes you feel safe, but do it after we've dealt with the immediate threat of complete annihilation. The political calculus was stark and ugly. Humanity was offering to shoulder the burden of fighting an existential threat, but the price was accepting humanity back into galactic society as equals, not pariahs. It meant acknowledging that sometimes civilization needed monsters to protect it from greater monsters. Elena activated the final display, showing the projected path of the Devourer fleet. Red tendrils stretched across the galaxy like infection vectors, showing how the consumption would spread from system to system until nothing remained but empty space. 18 months, she repeated. That's how long you have to decide whether your pride is worth more than your lives. Choose wisely, because there won't be a second chance to make this decision. The chamber fell silent, the weight of the choice settling over the assembled delegates like a burial shroud. Elena could see the fear in their alien expressions, the dawning realization that their peaceful galaxy was about to become a battlefield, whether they chose to acknowledge it or not. High Counselor Zixandra's mandibles clicked slowly, thoughtfully. The Kethvar hegemony will consider your proposal. But understand this, Ambassador Vasquez. If humanity betrays our trust in this matter, there will be no refuge for your species anywhere in the galaxy. Elena nodded grimly. And if you reject our proposal, there won't be a galaxy left for anyone to find refuge in. As the session concluded and the delegates began filing out in their environmental suits and containment fields, Elena remained at her podium, staring at the star map that showed the approaching darkness. Dr. Chen approached her, his cybernetic eye still interfacing with the display data. "Do you think they'll accept?" he asked quietly. Elena watched the last of the alien delegates disappear through the chamber's exits. "Some will. Enough, maybe. But it won't matter if they take too long to decide. And if they reject us entirely?" Elena's expression hardened. "Then we fight alone, like always." The chamber lights dimmed automatically as the session officially ended, leaving Elena and Chen alone with the holographic display of approaching doom. In 18 months, ready or not, the galaxy would discover whether humanity's violent nature was a curse or a blessing. Elena suspected it might be both. Admiral Sarah Kane stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution, humanity's newest and most powerful warship, watching the construction yards of Haven Colony work around the clock. Massive automated systems assembled weapon platforms, shield generators, and hull plating with mechanical precision that never slept. The sight should have filled her with pride, but instead, it reminded her of how utterly alone humanity stood in the galaxy. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Vasquez's presentation to the Galactic Council. 6 months of waiting for responses that never came, offers of alliance that were declined, and resources that were denied. The Council's official response had been a masterpiece of diplomatic language that essentially told humanity to handle their own problems while staying away from civilized space. Only 3 minor species had responded positively to humanity's warnings. The Terragani, a warrior culture from the Outer Rim who understood the value of preparation for conflict. The Zephyrites, whose homeworld had already fallen to advanced scouts of the Devourer fleet, leaving only scattered refugee populations. And the Makani, artificial beings who calculated the threat probability at 96% and logically concluded that cooperation was the optimal survival strategy. Kane's cybernetic implants chimed softly as Colonel Marcus Webb joined her on the observation deck. Webb commanded the 7th Marine Expeditionary Force, humanity's elite rapid response unit, and his scarred face told the story of a man who had seen combat on dozens of hostile worlds. "Latest intelligence from the Deep Space Monitoring Network," Webb said, handing Kane a datapad. "The Devourer fleet has accelerated. New estimate puts them at our outer defenses in 8 weeks, not the 12 we were planning for." Kane studied the data with growing dread. The alien fleet had somehow increased its speed without any apparent technological changes. Worse, long-range scans suggested the fleet was larger than their initial estimates, much larger. "How many ships are we looking at now?" Kane asked. "Conservative estimate, 50,000 vessels of various sizes. But, Admiral, these aren't just ships. Our xenobiologists think the entire fleet might be one massive organism that builds ship bodies as needed. Every time we get a new scan, the configuration has changed." Kane felt a familiar chill. Fighting a traditional fleet was one thing. Humanity had centuries of experience with naval combat tactics. Fighting a living entity that could reshape itself at will was something entirely different. "Status report on our own preparations." Webb pulled up another display on his personal interface, projecting it into the air between them. We've got 47 colony worlds fortified to various degrees. The industrial planets are pumping out ammunition and replacement parts around the clock. Every human settlement now has at least basic planetary defense systems. Not nearly enough, Kane muttered. No, but it's more than anyone else has. The Galactic Council is still debating whether your warnings constitute a legitimate threat or elaborate human propaganda. Kane laughed bitterly. Even after what happened to the Zephyrite homeworld? The destruction of Zephyr Prime had been broadcast across the galaxy 6 weeks ago. The Devourer advance scouts had arrived without warning and consumed the planet's entire biosphere in less than 36 hours. 40 billion Zephyrites had died, and the galactic response had been to offer thoughts and prayers while maintaining that the incident was an isolated anomaly. "Admiral," a young communications officer approached them nervously. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command." Kane followed the officer to the bridge, where General Harrison's weathered face appeared on the main screen. As the Supreme Commander of human military forces, Harrison had the impossible task of coordinating humanity's defense across dozens of star systems with resources that would have been inadequate for protecting a single world. "Admiral Kane," Harrison's voice crackled across the quantum communication link, "I need you to make a choice that's going to change everything." Kane felt her stomach drop. "Sir?" "Intelligence suggests the Devourers aren't just randomly consuming everything in their path. They're selectively targeting the most defensible positions first. They want to eliminate any possibility of organized resistance before moving on to the easy targets." "Which means?" "Which means they're going to hit our frontier colonies first, before moving on to the inner systems. We can try to defend everything and fail everywhere. Or we can make the hard choice." Kane understood immediately, but she had to hear him say it. "The hard choice being? We evacuate the outer colonies and fall back to a defensive perimeter we can actually hold. Create killing fields in the empty systems where we can bleed them without risking civilian populations." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Humanity's outer colonies represented hundreds of years of exploration, terraforming, and settlement. Millions of people called those worlds home. The idea of simply abandoning them went against every military tradition humanity held sacred. "How many people are we talking about evacuating?" Kane asked quietly. 12 million civilians from 38 colonies. And Admiral, we don't have the transport capacity to evacuate them all." Kane closed her eyes. The mathematics were brutal and inescapable. Humanity's merchant fleet, even supplemented by hastily converted military vessels, could maybe evacuate 8 million people before the Devourers arrived. That left 4 million people who would have to be left behind. "Sir, I can't be part of a decision to abandon 4 million human beings." "Admiral," Harrison's voice carried the weight of command and absolute authority, "those 4 million are dead whether we evacuate them or not. The question is whether we're going to throw away our entire fleet in a futile gesture, or whether we're going to save who we can and prepare to hit back." Colonel Webb stepped forward. "General, my Marines volunteer to stay behind with the colonists who can't be evacuated. We'll make the Devourers pay for every world they take." "Negative, Colonel. I need your Marines for the counterattack. This isn't about heroic last stands. It's about winning a war." Kane understood the logic, but understanding it didn't make it any easier. "What's the timeline for the evacuation?" "Transport ships are already moving to the outer colonies. Priority goes to children, essential personnel, and anyone with critical skills. The rest—" Harrison's voice trailed off. "The rest we leave to die," Kane finished. "The rest we leave to buy us time," Harrison corrected. "Every day the Devourers spend consuming the outer colonies is another day our people have to prepare defenses in the inner systems." The communication ended, leaving Kane alone with the weight of command decisions that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She turned to Webb, seeing her own anguish reflected in his scarred features. "You know what the worst part is?" Kane said. If we had the galaxy's resources, if the other species had listened to us, we could save everyone. Webb nodded grimly. Instead, we're doing triage on an interstellar scale. Over the following weeks, the evacuation proceeded with mechanical efficiency that masked the human tragedy unfolding across the outer rim. Transport ships moved constantly between the doomed colonies and the inner defensive perimeter, carrying refugees who had lost everything to an enemy they had never seen. Kane threw herself into the tactical planning for the coming battle. Humanity's strategy was built around mobility and concentrated firepower. They couldn't match the Devourers in raw numbers or exotic technology, but they could choose when and where to fight. The plan was to hit hard, fade away, and repeat until the alien fleet was weakened enough for a decisive engagement. The first contact came exactly as the intelligence reports had predicted. The Devourer advance guard arrived at Kepler 7th, one of humanity's outermost mining colonies, and immediately began their consumption process. Long-range sensors showed the alien ships deploying their feeding tendrils, breaking down the planet's infrastructure at the molecular level. But this time, humanity was ready. The UES Defiance, commanded by Captain Lisa Rodriguez, had been stationed in the outer system disguised as a derelict cargo hauler. As the Devourer ships focused on consuming the abandoned colony, the Defiance powered up its weapons systems and began its attack run. Kane watched the battle unfold from the Fleet Command Center, her heart racing as humanity's newest weapons were tested against an alien threat. The Defiance's quantum torpedoes slammed into the nearest Devourer ship, their exotic warheads designed to disrupt matter at the fundamental level. For a moment, Kane allowed herself to hope. The alien ship staggered under the impact, its hull rippling as the quantum disruption spread through its structure. But then, the ship began to adapt, its living hull reforming around the damage, incorporating the weapon's energy signature into its own defenses. "Second wave incoming," reported the tactical officer. Kane watched in horror as the Devourer ship fired back, its weapon completely unlike anything in the galactic database. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, it launched what could only be described as concentrated entropy, a field of localized decay that aged the Defiance's hull by centuries in seconds. Captain Rodriguez managed to escape with her ship barely intact, but the message was clear. Humanity's most advanced weapons could hurt the Devourers, but not destroy them. And worse, the aliens learned from every encounter, becoming more resistant to human tactics with each engagement. Over the following days, similar engagements played out across the outer rim. Human ships would attack, inflict some damage, and retreat before the Devourers could fully adapt. But with each battle, the alien ships became harder to hurt, their defenses more sophisticated, their weapons more deadly. Kane began receiving reports from the evacuation fleet that painted an even more terrifying picture. The Devourer ships weren't just consuming planets. They were consuming the quantum vacuum itself, leaving regions of space that were somehow less real than they had been before. The implications were staggering and impossible to fully comprehend. "Admiral," Webb approached her console with a grim expression, "we're getting reports from the Galactic Council. They want to negotiate with the Devourers." Kane stared at him in disbelief. "Negotiate? With what? They don't communicate, they just consume." "The Council seems to think that's because no one has tried the right diplomatic approach. They're sending a delegation to establish peaceful contact." Kane felt a surge of rage that surprised her with its intensity. "Let me guess. They want us to arrange a meeting?" "Actually, no. They're planning to meet the Devourer fleet at the boundary between human space and Council territory. They think humanity's aggressive posture has prevented peaceful communication." The stupidity was breathtaking. Kane had seen the intelligence reports, watched the footage from destroyed worlds, witnessed firsthand how the Devourers operated. The idea that these cosmic predators would respond to diplomatic overtures was beyond naive. It was suicidal. "When?" Kane asked. "3 days from now. The delegation includes representatives from 16 different species, including High Counselor Zixandra of the Kethvar." Kane felt a moment of bitter satisfaction. The Kethvar had been humanity's most vocal critics, the species most responsible for humanity's exile to the Outer Rim. Now their leaders were about to discover the consequences of their arrogance. The diplomatic meeting was scheduled to take place at the edge of the Veil Nebula, a region of space that marked the traditional boundary between human territory and the civilized galaxy. Kane positioned a small observation fleet at maximum sensor range, both to monitor the encounter and to provide intelligence on Devourer capabilities. The Council delegation arrived first, their ships arranged in a peaceful formation that announced their non-hostile intentions to anyone monitoring their approach. Kane counted 47 vessels representing the major species of the galaxy, each ship a masterpiece of engineering that emphasized aesthetics and comfort over military capability. When the Devourer ships emerged from hyperspace, Kane felt her blood turn to ice. The alien vessels had grown since the last encounter, their hulls now incorporating elements that looked disturbingly familiar. Parts of consumed human ships, Zephyrite technology, even chunks of planetary matter had been integrated into the alien architecture in ways that defied understanding. The largest Devourer ship dwarfed the entire Council fleet. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, its surface rippling with organic patterns that hurt to look at directly. As Kane watched, smaller ships detached from the main body like cells dividing, each one unique in design but clearly part of the same terrifying whole. High Counselor Zixandra's ship, the Eternal Harmony, broke formation and approached the alien fleet with all the dignity befitting a major diplomatic encounter. Kane's sensors detected the transmission of a universal greeting in 47 different languages, a formal request for peaceful dialogue between civilized species. The Devourer response was immediate and absolute. Feeding tendrils erupted from the nearest alien ship, reaching across the void to envelop the Eternal Harmony. Kane watched in helpless horror as the Kethvar vessel was consumed in real time, its hull dissolving, its atmosphere absorbed, its crew disappearing into the alien digestive system. But the Devourers didn't stop with one ship. The feeding frenzy spread through the diplomatic fleet like a plague, alien appendages reaching out to consume vessel after vessel. The Council ships tried to flee, but their peaceful designs had never anticipated this kind of threat. They were too slow, too fragile, too naive. In less than 20 minutes, the entire diplomatic delegation was gone. 47 ships, thousands of the galaxy's best diplomatic minds. Centuries of accumulated knowledge and culture, all consumed and incorporated into the growing Devourer fleet. Kane's communications officer looked up from his console with a pale face. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Emergency Network. The Council is requesting immediate military assistance." Kane laughed, but there was no humor in it. After 6 months of ignoring our warnings, after denying us resources, after calling us warmongers and paranoids, now they want our help. "Ma'am, the transmission is specifically requesting humanity's defense of the core worlds." Kane stared at the tactical display showing the Devourer fleet as it began moving toward the inner galaxy. Behind them, the Outer Rim territories lay empty and consumed. 40 human colonies reduced to nothing but empty space. Ahead lay the heart of galactic civilization, billions of beings who had refused to listen to humanity's warnings. "Colonel Webb," Kane said quietly, "prepare our response to the Galactic Council." Webb smiled grimly. "What should I tell them, Admiral?" Kane watched the Devourer fleet accelerate toward the galaxy's core, their massive ships now incorporating technology from dozens of consumed species. Soon, they would reach the first major galactic trade routes. Soon, the species that had rejected humanity would discover what it meant to face an existential threat without adequate preparation. "Tell them," Kane said, "that humanity remembers exactly how we were treated when we tried to warn them. Tell them we remember every slight, every insult, every closed door. Tell them that if they want our help now, they're going to pay for it. And if they refuse to meet our terms?" Kane's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then they'll discover that sometimes the price of pride is extinction." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the deepest bunkers of Centauri Prime, the administrative heart of galactic civilization. For the first time in centuries, the great chambers designed to showcase the beauty and diversity of galactic culture had been abandoned for the utilitarian safety of underground command centers. The irony wasn't lost on Admiral Kane as she materialized via holographic projection into the cramped conference room where the galaxy's leaders now cowered. 3 weeks had passed since the diplomatic delegation's annihilation. 3 weeks during which the Devourer fleet had carved a path of absolute destruction through 17 star systems. The industrial world of Nexandra, home to 12 billion Kethvar, had been consumed in 48 hours. The cultural capital of the Veltaran Collective, with its irreplaceable libraries spanning 20,000 years of galactic history, had been reduced to empty space. Even the Shardani crystal farms, which took millennia to grow, had been devoured and incorporated into the alien fleet's ever-expanding mass. High Counselor Zekthara of the Kethvar, elevated to leadership after Zixandra's death, looked haggard and desperate. Her compound eyes, once bright with the confidence of a superior species, now darted nervously around the bunker. The remaining council members showed similar signs of strain, their various forms of alien body language all conveying the same message: panic. "Admiral Kane," Zekathara began, her translated voice carrying formal diplomatic protocols even in crisis, "the Galactic Council formally requests the assistance of human military forces in repelling this threat to civilized space." Kane leaned back in her command chair aboard the UES Retribution, now positioned at the edge of human space like a guardian at the gates. Around her, the ship's bridge hummed with quiet activity as her crew monitored the ongoing evacuations from the inner systems. Humanity had spent the past weeks pulling back their own people from anything that might become a battleground, while the galactic species had remained paralyzed by disbelief. "That's interesting," Kane replied, her voice carefully neutral. 3 months ago, when we offered to help defend these same systems, the Council's response was to question our motives and deny us access to strategic resources. What's changed? The question hung in the air like a blade. Every being in the bunker knew the answer, but none wanted to voice it. The galaxy's peaceful species had discovered that their idealistic civilization was utterly helpless against an enemy that didn't share their values. The Veltaran representative, now speaking for what remained of their scattered species, rippled with agitation. "Admiral Kane, surely you understand that past political disagreements are irrelevant when facing extinction." Kane's laugh was cold enough to frost the air. "Political disagreements? Is that what you're calling it? When humanity warned you about this threat, you called us warmongers. When we requested resources to build defenses, you accused us of militaristic ambition. When we asked for access to strategic positions, you said we couldn't be trusted. Now you want our help?" Dr. Chen appeared beside Kane's holographic projection, his cybernetic eye glowing as it interfaced with tactical displays. "The data speaks for itself, counselors. Human space has been fortified and evacuated according to our defense plans. We've successfully delayed the Devourer advance in 17 separate engagements. Our casualties have been minimal. Our strategic position is secure." The numbers were stark. While galactic civilization crumbled system by system, humanity had fought a controlled withdrawal that maximized damage to the enemy while preserving their own forces. Human ships struck fast and hard, then disappeared into prepared positions where the devourers couldn't follow. It was exactly the kind of asymmetric warfare that peaceful species found incomprehensible. Counselor Merthian of the Nephrim, their gaseous form contained within an environmental suit, spoke with the desperation of a species facing imminent extinction. "What do you want from us, Admiral? Name your price." Kane had been preparing for this moment since the first Devourer ship had been detected. The terms she was about to present would fundamentally reshape galactic civilization, but they were the only way to ensure humanity never again faced exile and abandonment. "First," Kane began, "immediate and permanent human access to all star systems currently threatened by the Devourer advance. This includes full territorial rights and the authority to establish permanent military installations." The council members exchanged glances that conveyed their horror. Kane was essentially demanding control over the galaxy's most strategic real estate, the buffer zones between civilized space and the unknown regions beyond. Second, reparations for the economic and strategic losses humanity has suffered due to our exile from these regions. We calculate the total value at approximately 40 trillion galactic credits to be paid over the next century. High Counselor Zekthara's mandibles clicked in what Kane recognized as barely controlled rage. "You're demanding that we pay you for the privilege of saving our lives?" "I'm demanding that you acknowledge the cost of your previous decisions," Kane replied. "For 50 years, humanity has been forced to develop independently, to build our own infrastructure, to create our own trade networks. Now you want access to the military capabilities that isolation forced us to develop." Dr. Chen highlighted a tactical display showing the current military balance. "Human space maintains the largest fleet-to-population ratio in the galaxy. We've spent the resources you denied us building the ships and weapons that can actually hurt the Devourers. That capability has a price." "Third," Kane continued, "permanent human representation on all galactic governing bodies, proportional to our contribution to galactic defense. If humanity is going to be responsible for protecting the galaxy, humanity will have a voice in governing it." The political implications were staggering. Humanity had been systematically excluded from galactic leadership for decades. Now Kane was demanding not just inclusion, but a leadership role based on military contribution rather than population or economic influence. The Tarragani representative, one of the few species that had supported humanity from the beginning, spoke up. "The terms seem reasonable given the circumstances. Our species stands ready to support this arrangement." Kane acknowledged the Tarragani with a slight nod. Their warrior culture understood the relationship between military capability and political authority in ways that the peaceful species couldn't grasp. "Fourth and finally," Kane said, "formal acknowledgement that humanity's military culture and aggressive nature, far from being a liability, represents a necessary component of galactic security. Never again will human offers of assistance be dismissed as warmongering." The silence that followed was profound. Kane was demanding not just political concessions, but a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization viewed humanity. The species that had been exiled for being too violent was now demanding recognition as the galaxy's protector. High Counselor Zekthara spoke slowly, each word carefully considered. "And if we refuse these terms?" Kane's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Then you face the Devourers alone, with your peaceful fleets, your diplomatic protocols, and your cooperative traditions. How well did those work at the Vale Nebula?" The reminder of the diplomatic delegation's fate sent a shiver through the assembled council members. They had all seen the recordings, watched their most distinguished leaders consumed in minutes by an enemy that didn't understand concepts like civilization or mercy. "Admiral," Dr. Chen whispered into Kane's private communication channel, "long-range sensors are detecting Devourer movement toward the Proxima Trade Nexus. If they take that hub, They'll have access to the hyperspace routes that connect all the major systems. Kane nodded grimly. The Proxima Trade Nexus was the galaxy's economic heart, a massive station complex that coordinated commerce across 1,000 different worlds. Its loss would cripple galactic civilization even if every other system survived. "Counselors," Kane said, her voice taking on the hard edge of military command, "you have approximately 6 hours to make your decision. After that, the Devourer fleet will reach positions where even human intervention may not be sufficient to stop them." The Veltaran representative rippled with desperate urgency. 6 hours? We need time to consult with our governments to build consensus among our people." "You've had months to build consensus," Kane replied. "The time for debate ended when your diplomatic delegation was consumed. This is a military crisis requiring military solutions, and in military crises, decisions get made by the people with the guns." Dr. Chen activated another display showing human fleet positions. "We currently have 3 battle groups positioned to intercept the Devourer advance on the trade nexus. Our tactical analysis suggests a 67% probability of success if we engage within the next 8 hours. After that, the enemy will have consolidated their position and adapted to our previous tactics." Kane could see the calculations happening behind the alien's eyes. Without human intervention, the Proxima Trade Nexus would fall. With it would go the galactic economy, the communication networks that held civilization together, and any hope of organizing further resistance. "The Kethavar hegemony accepts your terms," High Counselor Zekthara said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. "We hereby grant humanity full territorial rights to the buffer zones, agree to the reparation payments, and acknowledge human leadership in galactic defense matters." One by one, the other species voiced their agreement. The Veltaran Collective, the Nephrim Commonwealth, the Shardani Crystallarchy, even the proud Othamiran, who had never acknowledged human legitimacy. Fear of extinction had accomplished what 50 years of diplomacy could not. "Excellent," Kane said, her satisfaction carefully controlled. "Dr. Chen, signal all human fleets to begin Operation Retribution." The operation that followed would be studied by military academicians for centuries to come. Human battle groups, positioned according to plans developed during humanity's exile, struck the Devourer fleet with coordinated precision that exploited every weakness human intelligence had identified. The UES Retribution led the assault on the largest Devourer ship, its quantum torpedoes now enhanced with technology reverse-engineered from consumed alien vessels. Kane watched from the bridge as her weapons found their mark, disrupting the alien ship's molecular cohesion and causing sections of its living hull to collapse. But the Devourers had learned from previous encounters. As human weapons struck home, the alien ships began to adapt, their hulls reforming to resist quantum disruption, their weapons evolving to counter human shield technology. "Admiral," reported the tactical officer, "enemy adaptation rate is accelerating. Our weapons are becoming less effective with each salvo." Kane had anticipated this. "Activate Protocol 7." Protocol 7 was humanity's ace in the hole, a tactical approach that no peaceful species would have considered. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer ships through superior firepower, human forces began targeting the connections between individual vessels, severing the communication links that allowed the alien fleet to function as a collective organism. The effect was immediate and devastating. Cut off from their central coordination, individual Devourer ships began operating independently, their adaptive capabilities fragmenting as each vessel tried to respond to threats without input from the collective intelligence. Colonel Webb's voice crackled over the communications system from his position aboard a marine assault craft. "Admiral, we're detecting massive confusion in the enemy fleet. Some ships are actually fighting each other as they compete for resources." Kane felt a surge of savage satisfaction. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their understanding of violence. their intuitive grasp of how to break things that seemed unbreakable. The Devourers might be able to adapt to weapons and tactics, but they couldn't adapt to having their fundamental nature turned against them. Over the course of 18 hours, the Battle of Proxima Trade Nexus raged across 3 star systems. Human forces using tactics that ranged from conventional warfare to psychological operations that exploited the alien collective's cognitive vulnerabilities systematically dismantled the Devourer fleet. When the last alien ship was destroyed, its biomechanical hull dissolving into component atoms, Kane found herself looking at a galaxy transformed. The species that had spent decades treating humanity as dangerous outcasts now looked to human leaders for protection and guidance. Admiral Kane, High Counselor Zekthara's voice carried across the quantum communication link. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request that humanity assume responsibility for galactic defense coordination. Kane smiled as she looked out at the stars that now fell under human protection. The offer is accepted, Counselor. But understand this. Humanity will defend the galaxy according to human principles. That means we prepare for threats before they arrive. We build defenses even when others call us paranoid, and we make the hard choices that peaceful species can't stomach. Dr. Chen approached her position on the bridge, his cybernetic eye reflecting the light of distant stars. Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Former Devourer technology is being incorporated into human research projects. Our scientists estimate it will advance our capabilities by centuries. Kane nodded, but her attention was focused on the broader implications. What's the status of our territorial claims? All major systems have acknowledged human authority over the buffer zones. We now control approximately 30% of navigable space, including the most strategically valuable positions. The transformation was complete. In less than a year, humanity had gone from galactic pariahs to galactic protectors. The species that had been too violent for civilized society now stood as civilization's guardians. There's one more thing, Admiral, Chen said quietly. Long-range sensors are detecting new signals from beyond the galactic rim. The Devourers weren't alone out there. Kane felt a familiar chill, but this time it was accompanied by anticipation rather than dread. Humanity now had the resources, the territory, and the political authority to face whatever threats emerged from the darkness between galaxies. Good, Kane said, watching her fleet take up protective positions around the trade nexus. Let them come. The galaxy learned an important lesson today. When monsters threaten civilization, you don't negotiate with them or try to understand them. You call in bigger monsters. She activated the ship-wide communication system, her voice carrying to every human vessel in the fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Kane. Today we didn't just defend the galaxy. We claimed our rightful place as its protectors. The species that once called us too dangerous for their company now sleeps safely under our guard. The irony was perfect and complete. Humanity's violent nature, the very characteristic that had led to their exile, had become the foundation of their authority. The galaxy's outcasts had become its rulers, not through conquest, but through the simple recognition that sometimes civilization needed monsters to protect it from greater monsters. As the human fleet settled into its new role as the galaxy's permanent guardians, Kane allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Retribution, it turned out, was best served as protection for those who had once rejected it.